I still remember October 2nd, 2002, like a deep cut etched into my memory. As an investigator in Montgomery County, I'd grown accustomed to cases, petty thefts, domestic disputes, the occasional murder with a clear motive. But that day, everything changed. A bullet shattered the window of a Michael's craft store in Aspen Hill. No victim, no trace, just a meaningless bang in the calm afternoon. I arrived at the scene, staring at the broken glass scattered across the floor, and wondered, what the hell is going on? No one could have guessed it was the first shot of a 3-week nightmare that would claim 10 innocent lives and plunge thousands into terror. Less than an hour later, the emergency call came. James Martin, 55, a program analyst at NOAA, lay dead in the parking lot of Shoppers Food Warehouse in Glenmont. I got there as the last light of dusk faded, the ambulance's red flashes painting his pale face. A single bullet through his chest. No footprints, no casings, no witnesses. The scene was eerily clean, as if death itself had struck and vanished into thin air. I knelt down, watching the blood pool on the concrete, a chill creeping up my spine. This wasn't a typical murder. It was the mark of a predator, a shadow lurking in the dark, and we had no idea what we were up against. A few hours later, I sat in my office, clutching a cold cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the preliminary report. No motive, no connection, just a 223 slug sitting silently in an evidence bag. Was it a madman in a rage or a calculating killer? The answer came faster than I'd hoped, but not in the way I wanted. The next day, October 3rd, 4 more shootings rang out within 2 hours, from Aspen Hill to nearby areas. Each victim fell to a single, precise shot from a distance. No hesitation. By nightfall, another died near Silver Springs border. The community began to feel the dread, but for us, those holding the case files, it was the moment we realized we were hunting a serial killer, and he had no intention of stopping. I looked out the window, the streetlights faint in the night fog, and asked myself, who is he? What does he want? At that point, I didn't know his name was John Allen Muhammad, or that the teenager with him was Lee Boyd Malvo, but I felt their presence, cold, ruthless, watching us from the shadows. When I first cracked open the files on John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo, I wasn't just cataloging a trail of bodies. I was dissecting 2 minds that had veered into a realm beyond comprehension. Every kill, every meticulously placed bullet, begged the question: what alchemy of rage, pain, or delusion could spawn such relentless evil? This wasn't a barroom brawl gone fatal or a junkie's desperate grab for cash. It was a calculated descent, and the more I peeled back their layers, the more I saw a chilling fusion of predator and pawn. John Allen Muhammad wasn't some street thug stumbling into murder. He was a Gulf War vet, a man who'd once saluted the flag, trained by the Army in marksmanship, logistics, discipline. But somewhere, that structure curdled into resentment, a festering wound from a failed marriage, a lost custody battle, or maybe just the slow burn of a world that didn't bend to his will. By the time Malvo testified in Muhammad's 2006 Montgomery County trial, the depth of his sickness spilled out. A 3-phase plan, a blueprint for terror so grandiose it felt like the ravings of a dictator. Phase 1 was the opening salvo. Kill 6 white people a day for 30 days, 180 souls erased in a month-long rampage. They'd cased the D.C. metro area like generals plotting a siege, sketching routes on napkins, timing traffic patterns, firing rounds into tree stumps until their shots were second nature. This wasn't chaos for kicks. It was domination, a bid to wield fear like a scepter. Muhammad didn't just want blood on his hands. He wanted a region on its knees, trembling at his unseen power. When gridlock or bad angles fouled his aim, I could feel his frustration etched in the evidence. A thwarted tyrant, recalibrating with icy precision. His mind was a fortress, each death a testament to a god complex that saw humanity as pawns in his private war. Lee Boyd Malvo, though, was a riddle wrapped in tragedy. At 17, he didn't strike me as a natural-born killer, just a kid with nowhere to belong, his brown eyes hollowed out by a life of drift. Born in Jamaica, abandoned by his mother, he'd bounced through shelters and streets until Muhammad found him in 2001, a stray ripe for molding. In court, Malvo's voice was a monotone as he recounted the killings. James Martin, the October 3rd Quartet, Linda Franklin, each name a cold tally. He'd claimed at first he fired every shot, a lie to shield Muhammad from the needle since minors dodged death row easier. I intended to kill them all, he'd said in his own 2003 trial, words flat as stone, a teenager reciting a grim script. But in 2006, after years of counseling, he cracked, "I'm not proud of myself. I'm just trying to make amends." It wasn't redemption, just the flicker of a conscience Muhammad had nearly extinguished. Malvo wasn't evil by birth. He was forged, a lump of clay shaped into a killer by a man who saw weakness and weaponized it. Muhammad taught him to aim, to reload, to vanish. But more than that, he taught him to feel nothing, to mirror the void within his mentor. Their partnership was a dance of domination and surrender. Muhammad wasn't just the brains. He was the puppet master, spinning a web of loyalty from Malvo's desperation. Inside their blue 1990 Chevrolet Caprice, a rolling crypt of steel and glass, Malvo slept inches from him. The Bushmaster rifle nestled close, a disciple tethered to his prophet. Muhammad fed him a warped gospel. They were avengers, architects of a new order, and Malvo drank it down, mistaking control for kinship. It wasn't friendship or fatherhood. It was a parasite latching onto a host, draining what little light remained. Late at night, hunched over their files, I wrestled with it. What fueled this? Muhammad's arrogance, a need to orchestrate a nightmare proving his might. Malvo's loss, a stolen boyhood bent into a blade. Together, they shared a chilling emptiness, a disdain for life that turned them into the monsters we hunted. By October 3rd, 2002, the Washington metropolitan area was a powder keg, and I was watching the fuse burn. I stood at a crime scene in Aspen Hill that morning, the fourth in 2 hours, staring at a woman's body slumped against her open trunk, groceries spilled, a carton of eggs smashed into a puddle of her blood. A single 223 round had punched through her chest, fired from a phantom perch, no sound but the thud of her fall. Earlier, a landscaper had crumpled mid-mow, grass clippings dusting his lifeless form. Then an old man on his porch, coffee still warm in his mug. Then a clerk outside a deli, cigarette dangling from limp fingers. All gone in a 2-mile radius, all by the same invisible hand. That evening, a fifth hit near Silver Spring, just over the DC line. A businessman in a suit, briefcase clutched as he bled out on the pavement. I walked that scene, the air thick with exhaust and grief, and knew we weren't just losing people. We were losing a community's soul. Fear was no longer a whisper. It was a scream. It spread like a virus. By noon, the precinct was a war zone of ringing phones, parents in hysterics, demanding to know if their kids were next. Montgomery County and DC schools bolted their doors. No recess, no gym, just kids pressed against windows, watching a world gone feral. I drove through Rockville that afternoon, streets eerily still, and saw a mother yank her son from a playground, her voice a ragged sob. "I can't lose him too." She clutched him, eyes darting to every shadow, every passing car. At a gas station in Wheaton, a man froze mid-pump as a newsflash crackled over his radio. Another shooting in Bowie, then bolted, leaving the nozzle swinging. Panic wasn't a choice. It was a reflex, burrowing into every home, every mind. I stopped at a grocery store later, watching a cashier flinch at a car backfiring, her hands shaking as she bagged canned goods. "I don't want to die here," she whispered, barely audible. Death wasn't just possible, it felt inevitable. For me, an investigator, it was a crucible. Civilians mobbed us at cordoned-off scenes, their questions a barrage. Who's doing this? When will it stop? A father thrust a photo of his daughter at me, voice breaking. "She's all I've got. Keep her safe." I wanted to promise, but my mouth stayed shut. Empty assurances wouldn't fill the void of our ignorance. Each new shooting was a lash. 5 on October 3rd, then a staccato of kills over weeks, each a reminder we were outmatched. We holed up in the ops room, maps plastered with red pins, ballistic arcs scribbled in marker. But the killer's logic was a cipher. One night, after the Silver Spring hit, I lingered by the body, a man my age, wallet photo of his kids poking out of his pocket. His wife's wails cut through the dusk, raw and unending, and I felt it. This wasn't just her loss. It was ours, a collective unraveling. Streets that once thrummed with life went silent. Kids vanished from yards. Commuters shunned highways. Every stranger a potential threat. A partner growled, "They're choking us alive," and I nodded, tasting the truth. We were prey in our own backyard. Mohammed and Malvo didn't just kill, they dismantled us. I'd see parents double-check locks, drivers scan mirrors for a blue sedan, store clerks duck at every loud noise. The Beltway turned into a no-man's land, every trip a gamble with a loaded deck. Each day stretched the tension thinner, the helplessness sharper, but it lit a fire in me too. This wasn't just a case. It was a war for the people who'd lost sleep, laughter, freedom. I vowed to end it, not just for the dead, but for the living still trapped under that scythe. Tracking John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo was like chasing smoke in a storm, elusive, maddening, and always one gust ahead. It started with a stumble. After the Michaels craft store shot and James Martin's murder on October 2nd, 2002, a rattled witness swore they'd seen a white van or truck peel away. We leapt on it, desperate for traction, flooding D.C., Maryland, and Virginia with checkpoints. White vans, delivery trucks, pickups, anything that fit the bill. I spent nights behind the wheel, headlights slicing through mist, pulling over bleary-eyed drivers who gaped at my badge. "Just a check," I'd mutter, peering into cargo beds, my gut sinking with each fruitless stop. The body count climbed, 4 on October 3rd, then sporadic strikes across state lines, and every dead end was a brick on my chest. I'd slump in my cruiser at dawn, coffee bitter and cold, whispering, "Where the hell are you?" We were swinging at ghosts. The haze thinned, but it was a slog. Ballistics handed us a lifeline. Rounds, uniform across scenes, fired from a rifle built for distance and death. A sniper's signature. We sprawled maps over precinct tables, red pins sprouting like wounds. Aspen Hill, Glenmont, Silver Spring, then south to Virginia's edges. The spread was erratic, a taunting sprawl with no rhythm to grasp. Public fury pounded us. Press conferences became shouting matches, Find them, ringing in our ears. Chief Charles Moose summoned us one midnight, face carved with exhaustion, voice a low growl. We're drowning out here, dig deeper. I traced a pin with my thumb, his urgency echoing in my skull. Time was a luxury we didn't have, and the dead kept piling up, 10 by mid-October, each a silent accusation. The tide turned in shards. The Bushmaster 223 linked 11 of 14 shootings, its rifling a damning imprint. In Tacoma, Washington, a search of Muhammad's old haunts unearthed a tree stump pocked with bullet holes. Practice rounds, a breadcrumb from his past life. Back east, a fuzzy tip about a blue 1990 Chevrolet Caprice floated up, too vague to pin but too specific to ignore. Then the killers spoke, a demand funneled through Moose on October 23rd. Tell the media, we have caught the sniper like a duck in a noose. It aired the next day, a bizarre nod to a Cherokee fable we couldn't crack, their own words tightening the trap. I stood in the ops room as Moose's voice hit the airwaves, my heart thudding. Were they smirking somewhere? Tuned in? It was a gamble, a flare in the dark, and we watched the shadows for a flicker. The end crashed in at 3:19 a.m. October 24th, at a rest stop off Interstate 70 near Myersville, Maryland. Ron Lance, a trucker with ice in his veins, clocked the Caprice, plates matching our alert, and wedged his rig across the exit, phone already to his ear. Got him pinned, he told dispatch, cool as steel. The call jolted our command center awake. I snatched my vest, pulse racing as units scrambled, converging silent and dark through the pre-dawn chill. We ringed the car under a sliver of moon, breath fogging in the cold. There they were, Muhammad and Malvo, slumped in sleep, the Bushmaster glinting in a bag, bipod jutting like a claw. Hands up, we roared, weapons trained, the air electric with strain. They stirred, groggy, then stiffened as steel cuffs bit their wrists. No fight, no flight, just a quiet surrender. I yanked the rifle out, its weight heavy with the lives it stole, and met Muhammad's eyes, flat, unrepentant, a man who'd played God and lost. Watching them cuffed and loaded, I felt no thrill, just a weary unclenching. The hunt had drained us, stretched us thin over weeks of dread, and ended not in gunfire but in stillness. We'd clawed our way through darkness, guided by scraps and grit, to drag them into the light. But as the tow truck hauled their Caprice away, I knew the victory was bittersweet. 10 families still grieved, a region still bore the scars. The road had been hell, and we'd walked it to the end. Justice crept in, steady and unyielding, though it couldn't erase the cost. On November 17, 2003, a Virginia jury nailed John Allen Muhammad with 4 counts: capital murder for Dean H. Myers, shot pumping gas in Manassas, a second murder charge under the state's anti-terrorism statute, killing to terrorize a populace, plus conspiracy and illegal firearm use. The courtroom held its breath as the gavel fell, the weight of 10 deaths pressing down on every word. The jury didn't waver. Death, they declared in unison, the only answer to his reign of fear. On March 9, 2004, a judge etched it in stone, and on November 10, 2009, at 9:11 p.m., lethal injection stopped his heart at Greensville Correctional Center. He refused a final statement, lips sealed in defiance, his last meal, rumored to be chicken with red sauce and cakes, shrouded in silence. No remorse, no closure, just a man who'd scripted a nightmare and met its end. Lee Boyd Malvo's path twisted differently. Nabbed first on federal weapons charges, he was shuffled to Virginia, facing trial for the October 14, 2002, murder of FBI analyst Linda Franklin outside a Home Depot in Falls Church. He played the insanity card. Muhammad's control, he said, had stripped his will, turned him into a marionette with a rifle. The jury saw a killer, not a victim, and in December 2003, handed him life without parole. In 2006, testifying at Muhammad's Maryland trial, he peeled back the full horror. Phase 2 aimed to gut a pregnant woman and kill a cop, then bomb the funeral. Phase 3 sought millions in extortion to fund a cabal of orphaned boys, trained as assassins across North America. His delivery was robotic, a catalog of atrocities, but a fracture showed. "I'm not proud of myself," he said, voice thinning. "I'm trying to make amends." Too late, too hollow. Now, he's entombed in Red Onion State Prison, a life sentence stretching into gray decades, a teenager who traded his youth for a trigger. As an investigator, I watched it all with a heavy heart. We'd snared them. October 24th, 2002, at that rest stop. Their caprice a coffin of their own making, but the win was tempered by loss. 10 lives: James Martin, the October 3rd 4, Linda Franklin, 7 more, etched in memory, their family's pain a shadow that didn't lift. Muhammad's death and Malvo's cage were justice, yes, but they didn't erase the sleepless nights, the red pins on our maps, the faces I couldn't save. Looking back, I see a thread of hard-earned truth. Evil festers where we don't look, but it buckles under persistence. The community's resilience, parents guarding kids, a trucker like Ron Lance stepping up, outlasted their terror. Justice honored the dead, not with fanfare, but with quiet resolve. Martin's last grocery run, Franklin's final errand, every stolen moment remembered in the law's slow grind. This isn't a tale of glory. It's a warning, a testament. We walked through darkness, felt its weight, and emerged not unscathed but unbroken. The nightmare faded, but its lessons linger. Stay sharp, stand together, hold fast to the light they tried to drown. For the 10, for the thousands they haunted, we owe that much.